much for inviting me here. Before I start my presentation, I was thinking perhaps I could prime us all a little bit to the topic I will speak about sustainable buildings. Recently I heard that this is the first year where the atmospheric concentration of CO2 exceeded 400 ppm, which was considered as a sort of limit for keeping temperature rise. You know, we need to keep the level of concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere at this level too, and then to decline steeply after some time if we want to really keep the temperature rise by 2 degrees. But we are nowhere to keep this concentration actually at this level. We are safely on the curve to rise it further. And this is just one bad message that we received this year. There are many other evidence proofs that that we are not on the path to sustainability. Recently, Stockholm Environmental Institute published a study. There was a series of environmental indicators, and basically the trend. If you are familiar with the CO2 concentration curve, the famous ice hockey stick, so actually most of these environmental indicators, the set of indicators, they have the same curve. It is exponential curve. So these are the things that we in DG Environment we are considering, and we are asking ourselves what should be the policy response to that. And one of the questions about what are the sectors that are most responsible for environmental impacts, and in this case it is food sector, housing sector, and mobility. So of course housing sector is very much priority for measures, and you know we are working on policies that would actually make also this sector more sustainable. So when the organizers asked me whether I could come and speak about next or future EU policies, I was quite happy, because I can say that yes, the Commission is working on certain policies in this sector, despite the fact that many policy proposals were actually adopted recently, especially those focused on energy efficiency. That is, I guess, the main subject of your interest. I would like to inform you about initiatives that go farther, that don't not only look at energy efficiency, or not only look at energy efficiency in the use phase of buildings, but go farther, look at other aspects of sustainability. So this is just to remind us about the importance of this sector. We already know from the quiz that the housing sector is responsible for consumption of about 50% of materials that are extracted from nature, but it is also a very important sector from the perspective of final energy consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption, and waste generated. You see the statistics here. Yeah. So what can be done with that? And there are many solutions and many technological innovations that can be applied, etc. Perhaps too many, and sometimes it is very difficult, you know, to find the right way how we address the potential trade-offs. For example, we can save more energy in the use phase, but perhaps we use more material. Maybe we use more energy by producing those materials that we use to actually reduce energy in the use phase. We may use a lot of water. We may have other impacts. So there may be trade-offs. How to deal with these trade-offs? We really need to understand better and to find a way how to make the right decisions. This is just one example about the embedded energy. So let's imagine that there is an investor that wants to build a building, and this investor considers, what can I do to reduce the impact of my building? So one possibility, let's say, is to install photovoltaic panels so that the building is perhaps active, even provides more energy than it spends in the use phase. But the other option is, for example, to use, for certain type of buildings, to use different materials, to use concrete that is low energy concrete and can actually save a lot of energy. So it is not sort of intuitive what the right solution is. We need to have the knowledge. We need to have tools how we decide this in these situations when we have important trade-offs. So, for example, in this case, it seems that it is better actually to use low energy or low carbon concrete. It is possible to save or to prevent almost 10 times more CO2 emissions by using different materials than by installing photovoltaic panels. So when we speak to construction sector, they tell us we not always understand these issues. There are many knowledge gaps, and it would be useful to have some tools and to have policies that would incentivize and encourage and help us to make the right decisions, both on the supply side, construction, industry, architects, etc., as well as on the demand side, potential users, owners, buyers of buildings. Why this initiative now? Of course, there is this pressure from understanding of what's going on, the environmental impact, at global level. But more concretely, especially recently, there were a series of strategic documents adopted at EU level that actually give us mandate and urge us actually to accelerate policy development and put forward proposals. So one of these strategic documents is what we call Resource Efficiency Roadmap, the document adopted in 2011. It is one of the flagship initiatives of the EU 2020, the overall economic development strategy of the EU until 2020. The Resource Efficiency Roadmap is a sort of, on one side it is a visionary document, it sets vision up to 2050, but on the other hand it also proposes about 100 actions, concrete actions that the Commission and Member States are committed to take immediately. And it highlights the importance of housing sector and the need to actually to have policy to stimulate sustainability and provision of sustainable buildings. And more recently, it was strategy for the sustainable competitiveness of the construction sector. This is a document that not only that looks at competitiveness mainly, but identifies resource efficiency as a very important factor that influences competitiveness of the construction sector. And that through improved resource efficiency, actually European construction sector can gain, can improve, can increase its competitiveness. And policies encouraging resource efficiency can actually stimulate growth in this sector. So we are now working, two DGs, DG Environment and DG Enterprise are working together on a communication on, the working title is Communication on Sustainable Buildings. And I'll try to indicate where we are, what we think are the issues that needs to be addressed, what are possible policy options, and what are questions that we ask ourselves. And I would be really happy if you, if I could ask these questions to you, to this audience, and receive certain feedback, certain answers in the public consultation that will be launched very soon. Please understand that everything that I say about this communication, it is not really, nothing is decided. We are in the phase when we consider issues and policy options. So the final communication can be very different, and this is the beginning of the process. We are still carrying out studies and collect evidence, etc. But it is very important what stakeholders will tell us. So if you think that what I present today is not right, it is very important that we hear from you. So what we think about the scope of this, what we should focus on is, first of all, we want to, the communication will focus on environmental aspects of sustainability. So resource efficiency, environmental impacts, etc. It doesn't mean that we neglect economic and social aspects, in contrary. But this is a sort of relatively narrowly focused communication. We will address environmental aspects, but in the process of ex-ante assessment of this, of course, we will also assess what would be economic impact, what would be social impact, etc. And this is a work that will complement other initiatives, especially those taken under this action plan for sustainable competitiveness of construction sector. Our objective is to provide a holistic view on buildings from environmental perspective. So we want to look at all environmental aspects. We want to look at all life cycle stages of life cycle. Not only use phase, which was the focus of the existing policies, but also extraction of materials, processing, construction process itself, use phase, but also end of life of buildings. What will happen with buildings and materials after it is used? We want to look at the whole scale of issues and indicators. We assume that from all we know that perhaps the most important will be embedded energy, material use, and water. But also we look at least initially, we will analyze what are potentially other environmental aspects that are relevant for the sector. We want to cover residential and non-residential buildings, but for practical reason, we will at this stage exclude industrial buildings and infrastructure. When we started this work, we had to look what has been done so far, and actually it is quite a lot, especially in the field of energy efficiency. There was Energy Performance of Buildings Directive adopted a couple of years ago. More recently, it was Energy Efficiency Directive. These two directives set a lot of requirements for energy performance of buildings that are applicable now, but especially in the future. And then complementary instruments at EU level, energy labeling and the Eco-Design Directive. These don't address buildings per se, but they address many building components that actually use energy. And these are very strong instruments, especially the Eco-Design Directive that sets mandatory regulatory requirements for energy using products, and many of those are integral part of buildings, like heating systems, for example. In the area of material efficiency, when it comes to building, the only instrument at EU level is the Waste Framework Directive that sets requirements for recycling of demolition waste, nothing more special. And then there are many instruments used at EU level, standards, certain regulatory requirements. including those that are related to assessment and reporting of environmental impacts of buildings. So taking into consideration what has been done already, we propose objective for this initiative, which is the general objective is to reduce environmental impacts of buildings by improving especially resource efficiency. And as a consequence, we expect, and this is the economic aspect, we expect economic benefits for the society in general, but also economic benefits for construction sector. So growth and competitiveness stimulated by resource efficiency through the process of improving resource efficiency in the sector. In more specific terms, we would like to improve knowledge and information on resource use by buildings to fill in the gaps that still exist. Then we would like to raise awareness among all actors and stakeholders in supply chain in the construction sector. And more than just awareness, actually, we want to increase demand among private and public consumers, but also developers, construction industry, architects, etc. We would like to remove barriers that we see already as a consequence of different policies in member states. We see that there are either national policies or actually even private initiatives that create a sort of fragmented market within EU. There are different approaches to defining environmental performance of buildings. There are different requirements by developers, by local standards, etc. So we want to look at that and address where these differences can actually pose certain barriers for the industry to improve environmental performance. And we would like to increase material efficiency and, in particular, to improve management of construction waste. And now the possible policy options or areas where we think that we should propose certain proposals. So one that has been already identified before in the communication on sustainable competitiveness, but it was formulated in a very general way. Now, from discussion with stakeholders, we understand that what would be helpful if there is a common European assessment framework that could be used for assessment of environmental performance of buildings. So it is clear what environmental performance is, how to deal with those trade-offs between different impacts and different phases in the life cycle of buildings. And these probably have to be at the level of buildings, the systems, maybe at the level of certain building components and at the level of construction products. Then if we have this assessment system, it should be used, and the information about buildings should be generated and should be available in the value chain. The developers or investors should have access to this information so they can use it for their decisions. Architects should use it and provide this information. Construction business, but perhaps more importantly, the future users, so that demand for buildings, what kind of buildings are expected to be on the market and asked for by private and institutional buyers and users should be informed by this information as well. So how to stimulate provision of this information based on this common definition and common assessment scheme? how this information could be stimulated and used in the value chain. One element of that can be recommendation for reporting requirements for building and building components. Then to help especially institutional users and buyers of buildings, especially public authorities in the public sector, we think that as part of this communication, we could establish comprehensive green public procurement criteria for different categories of buildings, because we see, the public sector is very important consumer in this sector, and from our green public procurement program, we see a lot of need. Public procurers in member states, they actually ask for robust, reliable criteria they could use in their procurement. They want to procure sustainable buildings, but simply they don't know how yet. We would like to. There was a question about what needs to be done so that industry actually takes up, these new construction methods, etc., and actually builds buildings. And one part of the answer was that there should be incentives, especially for SMEs. We are convinced that incentives are absolutely critical, both on supply side and demand side, and we want to work with member states to improve the incentive system that exists now, and eventually to look at possibilities to provide more incentives. Then one specific area that we would like to address is again based on our experience and input from stakeholders. We sometimes hear from producers of construction materials is that we would like to recycle. There is a lot of stock of our particular material in the buildings and in demolition waste, but we cannot get hold of that because of certain methods and processes by companies that demolish or process waste. One example, plaster industry. They say that there is a lot of gypsum that is in demolition waste. They can easily produce new plaster from recycled gypsum, but it is mixed with other waste. But they say the companies that do demolition, they don't want to separate this waste. It is too expensive for them. So this is clear example of split incentives in potential value chain where certain type of waste can be valorized, can have much higher value than today. There is a situation that one actor has cost and no benefit, but then there is potential benefit on the other side. And these industries, though they are not competing with each other, they don't cooperate. They don't share potential profit, etc. So we want to address such situation. The same thing we hear from glass industry. Glass that is used in buildings is also very, very rarely separated and recycled. So there are situations where there is potential to manage materials, especially in the demolition phase, differently, so that there is the waste that is now really wasted and landfilled or used in very low value products could be used differently, but it doesn't happen. The market fails for certain reasons. So we want to address these identify and address these situations and help those industries to work together, share their profit, and actually, to prevent a lot of waste. So the open questions we want to ask in the public consultation, and we ask the stakeholders at every occasion. The first question is how we should define green buildings. So what are the aspects of environmental performance, resource use beyond energy efficiency in the use phase, because it is more or less covered, that should be taken into account. So I would be happy to hear from you about your opinion on this. Then if we are able to define what is environmental performance of buildings, then we have to ask how we can measure it. What is the metrics? What kind of system? So what is the practical way? There are many schemes, especially private schemes, that dominate certain markets in Europe. But for example, these schemes are incompatible. We cannot use them as a European system. So what would be the best approach? Is it a problem if we use many different incompatible schemes? Do we need a European one? Should it be a standard? Should it be something new? Should we ask those dominant assessment scheme on the market to work together and actually to converge and develop something that can be used in Europe? So these are the questions that preoccupy our minds at the moment. Then concerning incentives, the issue I mentioned, split incentives in the value chain, in construction sector, how we can address them, what are practical approaches, practical tools, and then what kind of incentives public authorities could provide. There are already many fiscal schemes in member states, especially focused on consumers, that stimulate consumers to either purchase better performing buildings or refurbish existing buildings, etc. So what kind of incentives, how to improve the existing incentives, and are there any possibilities to introduce new incentives that would stimulate both supply and demand of sustainable buildings further? What is the appropriate level? Should it be local level, national level, European level, etc.? Okay, so that was I think that I asked more questions than provided answer. I did it intentionally. I don't want to impose especially in this phase, I don't want to speak about what the answers are. First, the answers we have may not be the right answers. As I said, we want to consult stakeholders, and my main objective was to stimulate discussion and thinking on your side, so that hopefully you will come back to us in the public consultation and provide us interesting and for us very important input in this discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Question or want to make a comment? Yes, a question at the back. Can you say who you are and use the microphone as a button?
Okay. Yes, my name is Enrique Aresti from DG Enterprise. I think that in order to achieve our goals, it's not only about having the right method or having even the right amount of money, but also about knowledge and the knowledge of the tradespeople. So we have to do a massive effort in vocational training and recycling. Well, retraining of people already working, so they know how to do the proper thing.
I cannot agree more with you. I focused. Yes, this is a stream of work that DG Enterprise does and plans to do under different programs that was initiated by the communication on sustainable competitiveness of construction sector. There are other initiatives in the pipeline. Your colleague also work on green entrepreneurship, which focus on SMEs and will provide certain training and support by SME support networks to actually raise awareness of opportunities and possibilities, what needs to be done. There will be funding available actually to help SMEs to introduce innovative technologies, materials, etc. So absolutely there must be complementary initiatives. These initiatives intends to sort of provide a level playing field and provide tools that can be used, let's say, national authorities. I mentioned incentives. You know, today certain governments come to us and tell us, we would like to stimulate provision of sustainable buildings, but we don't know actually how to measure, how to discriminate between more sustainable and less sustainable buildings. At the moment, we do it on the basis of energy efficiency in the use phase. Do you have something that would complement that and provide also view on material efficiency and other efficiencies? And this is why we want to work on this assessment framework to facilitate not only activities at EU level, but activities at national level, local level, private initiatives, etc.
Yes, Ingrid Reumert from VELUX. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And I think it's absolutely right with the holistic approach and looking at the life cycle. And I think it's very interesting to hear the Commission now taking the next step from energy efficient buildings to more sustainable buildings. So I have two questions. One is, how does the idea of life cycle assessment of building material, building products fit into your thoughts? We know certain building manufacturers are now producing new products which can actually be a positive contribution or have positive LCAs. So that will be my first question. And my second question will be concerning the whole aspect of indoor climate. Because we know if we want to have house owners retrofit in a sustainable way, one of the things that can spur this, make this an extra incentive is if you can improve the indoor climate. So how do you see this as part of new sustainable buildings? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interesting questions, and I'm not sure if I have a complete answer, but I can tell you what is our current thinking. When it comes to construction products and life cycle impacts, there is important work done by standardization bodies, Sensenelec, the development of standards for environmental product declaration for construction products. The Commission itself developed a horizontal life cycle methodology for products, so-called product environmental footprint. There are certain differences, and these differences are because there were separate processes, different time frames, etc. But I believe that these two systems will, over time, they will converge, so that we will have a unique approach, and that this information will be used. But what is more complicated is that how this information is then used for assessment of the building as a system, because you can use very good materials in very bad way, or vice versa. So certain materials that may have big life cycle impact can actually reduce impact of buildings in other phase, or maybe. Yeah, so there are. I think what is important is that the assessment framework at building level properly takes this impact of life cycle impact of construction products into account, and we are not yet there. It will be process that will probably take a few years to develop this assessment scheme for buildings. We will certainly take inspiration from the existing schemes that exist in the UK, in France, in Germany, and other countries, and to see, we will have a stakeholders process, participatory process, to decide what is the best way forward. So it is our work for the future. Concerning indoor quality, at the moment our position is that this initiative should not look into that, because this is a health aspect, and we believe that there should be sort of mandatory requirements concerning health for buildings, and this is absolute requirement. We don't want to have sustainable buildings that affect human health. first buildings have to be safe and healthy, and then we can look at material efficiency. So this is our view, but stakeholders tell us this is nice, but these requirements don't exist. So they basically want this initiative to be as a vehicle to address these issues as well. But I would say that it will have to be decided whether these health issues will be included in the scope or no. At this stage, we don't include it because we believe that it should be done separately with different stakeholders. That includes also epidemiologists and all stakeholders that deal with health issues, and there should be a regulatory approach when it comes to health issues. While we don't want to have necessary regulatory approach, we want to facilitate, that to help industry without necessary regulatory requirements to actually, to take initiatives to improve environmental or resource efficiency performance of buildings.
Well, it's not a question, but maybe just to add, Robert Nye, European Commission, DG Energy, responsible for the EPBD. On indoor air quality, I mean, it's clear that this is an issue and it will become a bigger issue when we move towards nearly zero energy buildings, for example. The Commission, led by DG Sanko, has already an expert group looking at indoor air quality. The EPBD itself mentions it, but doesn't really tackle it. And we might have an opportunity in the upcoming review by 2017 to look in a bit more detail at indoor air quality and whether the directive could give more incentives or more direction to member states in this direction, because it's clearly a critical issue that we have to tackle more comprehensively as I think going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's Jonna Biskota from United Technologies. Thanks very much. I think it'll be a very useful public consultation, trying to find out and also hopefully involving a lot of the stakeholders, because I think we've seen the energy efficiency requirements and the certification systems in the countries which are not really taking off, let's put it that way. In some countries it's only a few % of the buildings that actually have that certificate. So how to interest the sector more, how to get this construction sector really to look at this, that's a question. Also, we had seen the eco-label for a sustainable building, which I don't know exactly where it's at, but it didn't really seem to take off so much either. Industry couldn't really agree on that. Eco-label in general hasn't really got the public enthusiasm. So how to get the sector really going with this, that's the question.
We look at buildings a little bit as a product in this policy, and it is valid for all products, but for buildings, there are both supply side and demand side is quite conservative. But there are, I think that public authorities play a very important role. So public procurement can be critical for that, and there we see a lot of interest. But as I said, that many public authorities simply are not sure what they should ask for, so they go for safe things, the energy efficiency requirements, which is already very good. Many public authorities don't even do that for certain reason, because perhaps they would have to invest more, and benefits would come only later. So there are many barriers. This is why I think that incentives and public procurement can be one of those incentives, but also other incentives will be very, very important. But I don't have any. You are right. The eco-label doesn't exist yet for buildings, so we started to develop it, but then we sort of slow down this process because we see that the need for more comprehensive assessment framework. So these two streams of work will actually merge together. We see some interest in certain private labels in certain markets where government promotes and government procurement actually uses this. So this gives us a hope that there is a chance that at least part of the market will take up a scheme there is a chance that if the scheme is more comprehensive and is European, that it will be used not only in those markets where those schemes exist now, but also in other markets. Developers tell us, yes, the existence of many different schemes actually confuses us. We want something more uniform, level playing field. If we have it, we will use it more. So all these elements perhaps will contribute, and the market will take up this.